Now we're ready to start chapter 3, and because there's a written document that goes along with this, what you'll see in there at the beginning of chapter 3 is that I review a number of things that I've gone over in pretty good detail about the project window, reminding you to always save and then save as, about how to make edits in the source window, about how to use in and out points in the source window to bring your clips down, how to do markers in the source window or in the timeline window. So I think rather than go over all of that, again, you can just look back at chapter 2 or read back over chapter 2. And just to remind you that you want to make sure that all of these inner boxes are checked in case there's some function that can only be done when they're checked. I did want to show you one thing about using markers, and also you might notice that things are having they're two projects and they have different dates on them, and don't mind that. It's just that I have sort of a spare project where you start working and I have one that's already edited, and they're starting to get different names because I keep saving them. So if I go to 7.7b and I open sequence 1, which is already there, there's nothing in there right now. Okay, so now we're ready to start bringing your clips into the timeline. And as I showed you, if you worked in the source window, you can always drag them from the source window. But when you're starting to kind of assemble your edit, you're going to be bringing them in from the clips folder. At this point, we only have one, and it's the master clips. And I've made a new sequence called Carbo Blank. The other Carbo Edit in Progress is the actual edit, which you'll see later. So I've numbered my clips because it's a sequential thing. How to make carbonara is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. And I had already set it up so I see good and description. So when I was looking at the clips, I decided that to list was good, but then I decided that to list better was better. I did keep that in, but I suppose I'd take that out because that's really the one I want, etc. Go on and on and on. So now what you do is you drag in the first clip and bring it onto the first track. You drag in the second, left click and drag, and bring it in onto the second track. And I think you're going to get the idea really soon. This one goes back on the first track, and you see that clip had a marker on it. So let me expand that just so you see. Wait, let me go to the head. That had a marker on it because of maybe something we did in the source window. So when I dragged this in, it kind of wanted to stop there, but it also will stop there because you're in Snap to Clip. So if you've done work and you have markers that might not be relevant anymore or that you'll maybe be thinking about later, just make sure that your clip butts up against the tail of the prior clip. So here's my guanciale, the good one, and here it goes onto the second track. And I probably don't have to keep going right now with all of it, but let's say one more on this track. Okay, so you might only put in a series of shots to start working with them, or you might bring them all in. However, as you're learning, I would say bring in a few and start to get familiar with how to work. But let's say that in a while, for any number of reasons, there are always reasons to do all kinds of things, you don't want this to be on the second track. You want it to be on the third track. You want it to get out of the way of something else, right? So you click on it and you can see it's selected. Both clips, audio and video are selected. And when you drag it, when you left click and drag on the video, only the video moves up. I'm going to undo that. If I were to click and drag on the audio and move it down, only it would move down. Don't ask me why Premiere does it that way. But it's easy enough to move this one then up afterwards. So now you both have them. I think they're both on the third track. So basically you have to do them separately, which is dumb. But anyway, that's how you do it. So you've moved them where you want them to be. But let's go back to where we were and let's go back to where we were. And what if you, and also I see that this didn't snap to clip, so I'm going to make that clean. Okay, so let's say for some reason you were doing this later and you were working and you had unlinked these. You would use the Command L key to unlink them. If you wanted to unlink it the other way, you would just go up to unlink, right? Okay. Also, what if you were doing something and you had gone out of snap to clip? You would hit the S key, or you had, used this. And so these are unlinked now, and we're not in snap to clip. So if I try to move this up to track 3, that's okay. It moved without shifting around. But this one, you see, I can slide it. So as I'm dragging it down, I have to like, But I'm going to go back to where we were. And now I'm going to hold down the Shift key as I drag it, and it can't go anywhere. So if you don't want to get out of sync and you're moving things around, you just hold down the Shift key. So now I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that you can see these minute moves that we're going to make. When you're making decisions about where to edit, you can obviously play
I'm going to add a little
and decide you want to move this clip to start there instead. So obviously I can do that. But what just happened? I hadn't linked that clip back. So I'm going to Command Z, and I'm going to select those, and I'm going to do Command L, and now they're linked. Okay? So now let's say I want to move both the audio and the picture, but now look. So I'm going to go back wherever, it doesn't matter, and I'm going to go back into snap to clip with that, or with the S key. Now, boom, snap to clip. So I'm maybe where I want to be because I'm going to look at the edit again and make sure. Maybe I just wanted to see the difference of 1 or 2 frames or 5 frames. And I want to say, years ago I had a student and I was talking about her edit and I was saying, that's not very good. It should be maybe like 5 or 6 frames over. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, you're not editing by the second, you're editing by the frame. Every shot is made of 24 frames. Every single frame matters. When a hand moves and you want it to move and just get out of the frame, that's the difference of 1 frame. So you're using your right and left arrow keys a lot of times to work your way through a clip and see where's my exact cut point. And then you cut it. You don't just whatever, it might be fine, right? Okay, you do that at the beginning when you're setting things up, but then you start being precise. So you can select this and you can do those bracket things like that. I don't know what they're called. You can do Option, and look, it's moving 1 frame at a time, right? Pretty cool. Or you could go backwards, 1 frame. So, you're editing and you look at this and you think,
okay, I'm going to add a little olive oil,
for example, but I'll show you the difference. So we'll go back here. We'll go back here and we'll drag this over. Because we'll see, do we want...
okay, I'm going to add a little olive oil to my water.
Or do we, do we want it to...
I'm going to add a little olive oil to my water.
The audio for that doesn't really match the picture, but anyway, that's weird. We'll fix that later. So either we want it to...
okay, I'm going to add a little olive oil to my...
or we want to see the pot before the olive oil thing comes in. So... I could drag it back, or I could use Option backwards, and I could go back a few frames, maybe 5 frames.
Okay, I'm going to add a little olive oil to my water.
Oh, when I said this audio doesn't sync, it's because this was overlapping. That was the audio for the second shot. My bad. So anyway, so you can move that, or you can do Option Shift, and that's 5 frames at a time. So you can watch her drink her wine. So let's go back to here for the moment. Okay, and just one reminder again that if you want to go through and see what you have, if you want to jump for a while, you use the up and down arrow keys, and you're going from clip to clip. I'm going backwards, now I'm going forward. There's a little gap in there, so you see it paused. Clip, da-da-da-da. Okay, and that was also an overlap, so that wide paused. And if you want to look at one frame at a time, you're using the side arrow keys. The other thing is, if you start playing,
Oil to my water. Not too much water because I want to.
and you want to sort of do a quick review, what I did was I hit the L key. I started it playing,
Not too much water
and then
because I want to.
L, 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 and it's going faster and faster and faster. And if I want to go backwards, play, J, 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 faster, 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 faster. So if you want to speed along, I mean, you can use your play bar and just do that. But every once in a while, it's handy to use the J and the L keys. And this is a reminder also of why, when you did your preferences, you set it for scrubbing. You set it so that as you scrubbed along, you heard. Because if you don't hear that, it's not very helpful. You know, somehow when a person is talking, you know, maybe you don't hear it distinctly, but it's still very good to always be able to hear as you play along. Okay. There's also something you can do, but it involves having a numlock keyboard. And that is this. So it means, unlike your laptop, it has this whole separate unit of numbers over here. And I think you can make a laptop have those keys become numlock keys. You'll have to look that up, I'm sorry. But anyway, this is what we have in the classroom. And it's very handy for one particular thing. So even though we don't have lots of stuff in this edit, what if we did? And what if, let's pretend this is, you know, 20 minutes of an edit that we had done. And we have this gap here, and we wanted to close it. We could select everything and use Ripple Delete. But there's something you can do with the numlock keyboard, which, you know, you'll trust me, if you try it, you'll see why it can be really useful in certain situations. So what I've done is I've selected that area, and let's say how far do I want to move it? So I go to the tail of that clip and I make an in, and I go to the head of the next one and I make an out. And so I know that I want to move it 20 seconds and 2 frames, okay? So my clips are selected. I use the plus key. I see over here, this white window opens up, and I type 2002. I don't use the colons or semicolons if you're using a non-drop, whatever. I just do that, and I hit enter, and I went the wrong way. Okay, let's try that again by saying, now it's going to be minus 4004, right? So I'm going to do minus 4004, and there I am, butted up to the other thing. So I use it a lot, even with small moves. If there's something I want to fill or shift or whatever, I use the numlock keyboard. But maybe a lot of you won't have it when you're working on a laptop. So just so you know, if you do have one. So a lot of times when you're working, you're making changes and you're deleting things and you're creating gaps, and you want to be able to close the gap. So you can, again, use the A key, select everything, drag it over as long as you're in Snap to Clip. But what if something went wrong with that and you've got a 20-minute edit and you really don't want things to get out of place, right? You want to make sure you have no tracks that are locked, but you can do it much more easily without messing with the stuff that's to the right by using Ripple Delete. So there's just one funky aspect to it. So let's say here I am, and I chose this shot, but then I brought this in also at the time thinking, that might be better. I think I'll look at both of them. So I've reviewed both of them, and I've decided that, in fact, this is the one I want to use. So I delete that. delete key. So here we are with this gap, and if I do it, it's fine. And why is that? It's because the audio was on the same track. So let's undo that. Because I thought, oh, I'm going to, I usually ripple from the picture track, not the audio track. If I had done that, I would have seen that it was good. But since I was working from the visual, I didn't notice that. So let me show you what happens when you're not that lucky. So here we are. And now if I click on that, you see it's pretty bad. Okay, so I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to say ripple delete. And look what has happened. That's gone on top of that because that clip is on the same track as that one, and that's what butted up. So I'm going to undo it. And what happens if I do the audio? Same thing, right? So basically, you need to have something at the end that's on the same track as something at the beginning, and then you're good to go. And now that I've done that great ripple delete, I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to put it in the project files, and I'm going to call it C, and save it. So now it's called 710C. Now I'm going to show you the really great thing, which is when you use the Q and the W keys to do cuts. It's very groovy. Here I am, and I've decided instead of cutting where it was before, I'm actually going to start there for whatever reason. So I've got my play bar at that point, and all I do is hit the Q key. Watch what happens. I've cut the head of that clip, and the rest of it has butted up to the prior clip. Pretty cool, huh? I'm going to undo that, and if I instead decided I was going to end the clip here, I have my play bar where it needs to go, and I'm going to use the W key, and there you go. One of the things that you're going to be doing a lot is you're going to be shortening or lengthening a clip, right? So, you've brought it in and you think that's the good head and the good tail. But then you decide, for example, let's say on the fly, you decide you want to start here instead of back here. And it's very simple. You just left click and drag. You get the devil's pitchfork. And there you are. And there's your new in. Same thing with your out. You're watching it and you think, okay, I'll stop right there as she puts it down. And as long as you're in snap to clip, it's going to snap. You see how that white thing is at the bottom? Well, now it goes away. So easy. Endlessly cut back and forth, back and forth. And remember, it's never changing your original media. You're shortening this to 2 frames, but you still have the entire clip over in your clip folder. Okay, I'm going to show you something else about unlinked things and how they can be helpful. So remember how there was those 2 tracks that were overlapped. So you're a lot of times might get into a situation where you want the picture to come in and the sound to come in at a separate place. So let's say in this example, she's talking and
or pancetta. But
and she says but. So I'm going to go back because I'm going to try to get this pretty correct this time. So I want it to be just as she looks down, and I'm going to make a mark because that's where I know the picture is going to cut, okay? And then here, I kind of want it to start. Maybe it's going to start there. So her picture is going to cut to this. So I'll make this mark, make a mark on this, and then I'm going to drag this back. But if I try to drag both of them, they both move, and I don't want that. So if I just use the Option key, then I can drag back and snap to clip where I want that to come in, right? So now I'm going to take this clip and drag it over to my cut point, but there's going to be
or pancetta. I'm going to cut to one.
So she says or pancetta, and
you can also use Oscar Mayer bacon or pancetta. I'm going to.
But I sort of want her to also say or pancetta. So I'm going to try dragging this back a little bit and see what happens.
Or pancetta, but.
Okay, now I don't want to hear her say but, so I pretty much can see where, I can expand that. I can see where she starts to say but. So same principle, I'm going to use the Option key and I'm going to drag this back just sort of on the fly. Now it wanted to snap to that, so I'm going to take it off of Snap to Clip and I'm going to use the Option key and I'm going to just drag it over slightly. So now
Oscar Mayer bacon or pancetta. I'm going to cut the guanciale up in.
So this is a very tiny example of, you know, when your audio is overlapping or you picture whatever. But there are a lot of times when you do want to shift either your audio or your picture without the other one. And instead of having to go through the whole link and unlink thing, as long as you just use the Option key, you can do whatever you want with either of those tracks. One of the things that you want to do at times is to cut a clip. And I've shown you already how you essentially cut it by dragging your ins and your outs to make it shorter. But you might have things stacked up in a certain way and it would be easier just to cut through one clip and move things around. So there are a couple of ways to do it, and then there's a really great thing I'm going to show you with the Q and W keys. So first of all, here you are in your edit and you've looked at it and you've decided, like, let's say in this shot, it zooms in, starts to zoom in, and you want to just have, you know, the point at which it starts zooming because you don't want to have the rest of it. So, you know, you go in and you sort of find where it starts to go. And I have a marker, but I'm going to ignore that because that was from something else. So the play bar is where I want to cut, and I can either do Command K, or I'm going to undo that, or I can use the C key for razor. So that turns into a razor blade. And I'm in Snap to Clip. So again, it's showing me that I'm snapped on it and I can cut through it. Or I'm going to use the V to get back to normal cursor. Or I can do the slow way, which is, did I Command Z that? Let me make sure. No, I didn't Command Z that. So I'm going to move that back over. Or I can go over to the toolbar and go to the razor tool and turn it into that. But as you see, it was a little faster to use the C key. Anyway, but I'll cut that now. So what I've done is I've cut through both tracks, but it could be that I want to keep the rest of that audio, and so I only want to cut through the picture track. So I'm going to undo that, Command Z, and I'm going to put myself more or less back where we need to be. And I'm going to unlink, Command L, and then I'm going to use the C key, and I'm going to cut, and as you see, I've only cut through the picture track. So I've done that, and now, since I don't want this, I'm going to delete it with the delete key, and then what am I going to do? I'm going to relink these, because when I start moving around again, I want them to stay linked. So Command L, I've relinked them. Or, I'll undo that, or they're unlinked. I select them both, I right click, and I go to link, okay? So I just want to show you one thing that's really great if you're working with music. And a friend of mine showed me this years ago, and I've used it really often. Because if you're using a piece of music, and let's say you're making a music video, something where you really want to cut exactly to the beat in some way, you can set up your music track so you know exactly where you are. Because otherwise, if you drag a clip in and kind of maybe you're looking at the waveform and trying to see where the is, it's not as specific. So what you do is you go to a sequence, and I often make a scrap. I make a new sequence called scrap or scrap work, so that if I'm doing something like this or whatever else it might be, I don't want to be doing it in my edit because I might mess things up. So I've got it all in this scrap folder sequence. I do it, and then when I'm done and it's good, I copy it into my edit. So it's sort of handy to have that. This one happens to be called the music one for the moment. And I also, as you see, I imported a folder. I imported some music clips into a folder for the speed of having it done for you. And in it, I have 3 songs. And the one we're going to be working with is Where's the Love? So I've got that in my sequence. And all I'm going to be doing is selecting it so that the markers go into that. I'm going to use the up and down arrow keys to get myself set up at the beginning. I'm going to put my finger on the M key, and then I'm going to hit the play bar to start playing, and let's see. So now I have, if that's where I want the beats, I might decide later they should be somewhere else. But anyway, now I have very clearly marked all my ins and outs for the beat. So then if I'm working with, I don't know that Black Eyed Peas really goes with how to make carbonara, but for the sake of demonstration. So I've got this clip, and let's say I want that to be the first one. Now, I only want the visual to come in, right? I don't want the audio to overlap my music. So I'm just going to drag it. And let's say I decided, I looked at it, you know, always make those decisions beforehand. And I decided, here's my in for that clip. That's where I want it to start. So I drag in that, I'm in snap to clip, right, with the S key. And then I'm just going to drag this back to the first cut. Then I'm going to go to another clip where we're boiling water. And let's say I'm going to choose to do it there. And same thing, I'm going to use the hand to just drag in the visual. And then, let's see, what's next? Maybe cutting the guanciale. So let's start there. Another in, drag with the hand. I'm staggering them because I want to move things around later probably. So here we go. So that gets you set up really well to do further editing later, but it's a great tool to use when you're working with music. Okay, and I just did a great music video about cooking, so what am I going to do? I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to make sure that it's in the right place, and I'm going to call it C, and I'm going to do a save. And now it's called 77C. A lot of times when you're working, you might have, let's say, 2 clips stacked on top of each other, and you want to look at what the first one is like with the music or the sound or whatever, and then you want to see whether the second one is better. So you want to watch the one, and then you don't want to watch that one because you want to watch the second one. So what you're going to be doing is enabling and disabling your clip. That's the term that Premiere uses for sort of muting or, you know, blanking out your clips. Now, I showed you earlier when we were going through the timeline window that if you wanted to not see something, you could use the eyeball and it would make anything on that track not be visible anymore. And you see the yellow line is gone because that track doesn't exist for the moment. But it's a universal, it's all across that track. Same thing with the audio. But in a way, you don't really want to do that because you might forget, etc. So instead, let's pretend I'm just going to drag a clip in on top of another one, just arbitrarily. I'm going to drag that one in for the moment just for the ease. And so here I am, and I'm looking at this, and maybe it's going to go to that. And I think, yeah, but maybe I'd rather use a completely different image. And so I want to disable this clip for the moment. So I can right-click and go up to Enable, and then it goes away, and we see her again talking. And so I can watch whether I like this one. And then if I want to see this one again, I go back up to Enable, and then I see that one again. I can also do it by using a keyboard shortcut, which is Command-Shift-E. It's disabled. And then if I do Command-Shift-E again, it's enabled. So that's how you do enable and disable. Okay, just to review this, it's about linking and unlinking, and I just want to show you one aspect of it in relation to something else in the timeline. So here we are with a clip, and we need it to be unlinked, so now it's linked. I could go over here and do that, but what happens is that everything now is unlinked. And I think that's scary, because I might start moving something else and it's unlinked. So I would never use the overall unlink. So I would only use Command-L, selecting them both first, to unlink them. And then you have to select both of them again and use Command-L to relink them. So when you're working, you might unlink a clip, the audio from the video, because you're fooling around with moving the video over a little bit or whatever, and they're unlinked, and you need to get them relinked. So we'll see what happens if I go to the next clip, and let's say I've unlinked these, Command-L, because I thought, I don't want the audio from it. I just want to see what happens when I put this over here instead. So I look at it and I think, well,
Pepper on a fairly coarse grind.
That was a really weird edit. Why would I ever do that? So I want to relink them. Now, if you're in Snap to Clip, you can drag it back and hopefully it'll butt up and it'll be fine. But there are times when you can't do that very easily. So what you do is you relink them, Command-L, and now it tells me that they're 7 seconds, 20 frames out of sync. If I go to the video, it will tell me that I can either move it into sync or slip it into sync. Same thing is true for the audio, except, let me unselect them. That only wants to move into sync. So the reason for that is because you've got this length of the clip and of the audio. If you want to move the picture back, you can do one of two things, because you have extra, in a sense, extra media here, right? But with the audio, you don't. So what I'll show you. So if I move this into sync, it's going to go to the left, and I'm going to be sunk up. I'm going to undo that. If instead I move the video, I can do that, and they'll be sunk up. But I'm going to undo that, and we'll watch this for a second so you can see where it starts. So it's their hands. Okay, so now if I do this instead, slip into sync, what has happened is that here, you know, that where we were seeing
And a good
we're seeing a different head, because if you picture, the footage has moved over independent of the audio so that the audio and the picture are now aligned. So I'm going to go back to that with slip and slide. But if you're trying to resync something and you see that you can't slip it, you can only move it, it's because, let's say you have the entire clip, so there's no sort of extra media at the head or the tail of it, and you're simply going to move them back in, whether you want it to move over where the picture is or over where the audio is. You're just going to say move, and then what are you going to do? You're going to relink them. Okay, so now because I've done a little bit of work, I'm just going to do a Command S. I'll do another save as in a little while, because what we're going to do now is we're going to go through the toolbar window, which I mentioned briefly earlier, but now I'm going to go through and show you exactly what all of the things do. So here's your toolbar, and the first one is simple. It's your cursor, and it says Selection Tool V. So it means that if you're in some other thing and you want to go back to your cursor, you just do the V. Okay. The next one is Track Select Forward Tool, and it's the A key. So what that does is you hit the A key, or you go over there and click that, and you can click above your tracks or on your tracks, and now you've selected everything that's selected, and you can drag it forward or back. If for some reason, I'm going to go back to the V, if for some reason you just want to move everything on one track, you do the A key, and then you hold down the Shift key, and now it's only selecting that track, or that track, or that track. One caution about it is if you have a very tiny clip and then there's a lot of stuff and you're not in a very expanded mode and you do the A key, sometimes it's hard to grab that first one. This is actually working for me, but oh no, it isn't. So you see, that one, even though it was highlighted at first, I didn't really do a good job of grabbing it, so it didn't move. So I would make things bigger, and then I would be able to really grab it and move it. It's very weird going the other way. So the next thing in your toolbar is the ripple and the roll, and I'm going to show you each of them. And it's good to remember the keyboard shortcuts for them. So here we are, and we have these two clips. And what we want to do is cut the number 3 down by using the ripple tool, which is B. So the icon changes to this yellow arrow, which goes in either direction, right? So if I want to cut back B, and let's say I've put a mark there so I know where I want to go to. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to B, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to grab this, and what you'll see is that Boyle is shorter and Guanciale is the same, which is actually similar to the Q and W. So you can kind of use the Q and W as easily as you can use ripple and roll, because they're both dragging everything after them. And so if I put this on and I go in the other direction, I'm going to be shortening the Guanciale very short and leaving the Boyle alone. Okay? I'll go back to V, and maybe I'll undo this a few times so we have a fuller visual. The other one is the N. So roll shifts the cut point between the two clips while maintaining the outer edges of both, which means you've got, let's say you've got a little piece of music here, and it's perfect. And you've got these two shots, and you like both of them, but maybe the first shot should end a little sooner. So you want this to stay the same and this to stay the same. So if I use the N key and get this football and I do it, look what happens here. It says trim media limit reached on video 1. And that's because this is the very head of the clip. So I can't add in more, right? So let's reconstruct this to give us the option to do it. I'm going to do a ripple delete. And now let's see. So now if I use the N key and I want to roll this over, there I did it. And watch the two ends stay the same length. But now this clip is a little bit shorter and this clip is a little bit longer. It's obviously affecting the audio also, but since I was sort of describing using this with music, that might not be an issue. Or, you know, if you had a continuous voiceover and you wanted to, you know, change the position of the pictures, that would be fine. You can always unlink them if you only want to move the pictures and somehow keep several pieces of audio in place. So that's ripple and roll. Now there's a really great thing called rate stretch. And the reason it's great is that earlier on when we were setting the preferences and stuff, there was something about where speed duration is. And I said, that's where speed duration is, but you can ignore it for the most part. And that's because you have rate stretch as a tool. Okay, so let's say you're editing and you like this shot here and you like this shot here and you don't want this shot to start any earlier than it does. It has to be there in alignment with the audio, right? But you've got this gap. So what can you do about that? If this is all there is of this, what are you going to do? Well, instead of right-clicking on this and doing, you know, duration, speed, whatever, you're going to simply use the R key and drag this over. And you see now how it says 89.05%? So what you've done is you've kind of slowed down your clip that much really easily, instead of having to, you know, go back, how big is the gap? I need it to be, you know, I need the shot to be that long, what rate, blah, blah, blah. You've just done it very easily with the rate stretch. But if I go back, I show you that if you make an out point and you go back to the head of this and you make an in, you see that it's 1412 over here, right? So then you want to change speed and duration there. And now you want it to be 1412. And it's done the same thing. But that took me a little bit longer. And for some odd reason, the number is slightly different than the other one. But I can't explain that. But that took longer than just using the rate stretch tool. So in most cases, that's a very handy tool to have. So now I'm going to show you the next thing in the toolbar, which is slip and slide. And that is this icon. Slip tool is Y. So we'll start with that. So here's an example. I have one shot, which is a wide shot of her saying
6 pasta, bacon, eggs.
The ingredients. Okay. Then I have a close-up
5 ingredients. Pasta.
Of her hand, and she's doing it. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of option, delete. I'm going to get rid of the audio of that second one. And I'm going to drag this over more or less in the ballpark, right?
Pasta.
So it's obviously off, right? And I've marked the place where she points to the pasta below. I'm going to disable this for a second. Command-Shift-E, just to make sure. So here we go. Let's see. Ingredients. Pasta. So that mark looks pretty good. I might be off by a frame or two, but we'll fix that later. And then I'm going to re-enable this, Command-Shift-E, and I can do this in the source window or down there. So I'm going to look at this one and see when her finger enters the frame, right and left arrow keys. I'm going to go back because maybe I want to cut right when it enters the frame, right? So that'd be that frame. So that is, and maybe you have a pen on hand, it's 12, 23, 39, 13. So that's the start. So when I go back here and I use the Y key, I get this other icon. And when I start sliding it, up here in the program window, I see time code. So I see that the head frame is now 3722, and I want 3913. So I'm going to go backwards until I get to 13, and I'm going to let go. Okay, so theoretically, I've pretty much hit the mark. Let's see what happens now. And I don't know where the head, like I might cut off the head of the clip, but I just want to see if I've got the matching.
6, pasta, bacon, eggs, parmesan.
Okay, so
6, pasta,
to me, maybe
pasta.
that happens a little too quickly. So maybe I will go back and I'll use the Y key again, and I'll just drag it slightly to the right. Here we go, by a few frames. And let's see now.
6, pasta.
That's better,
Bacon.
right? And then maybe, well, I think that looks pretty good. If it didn't, I could drag the head or tail and change things around. But that's pretty good. So the idea is that this clip has all of that stuff and all of that stuff that you can't see because you're only seeing what's in here. But when you're slipping, you're taking the entire clip and moving it that way or moving it that way while retaining the borders of it. So, you know, you have somebody swimming along the beach and they're running along the beach, let's say, and it looks good under the sound of somebody talking about running. But in a way, they're running and then, I don't know, a bird flies by and you like that. But you don't have the part with the bird because that's down here. So you just set it for slip and you drag it this way and you look at it and you see if now you've got the bird flying by. So when you've got a lot of stuff edited together, slip is a really fantastic tool because otherwise I would have had to, you know, bring it up in the source, cut the head and tail, drag it back down, see if it's in the right place. So it was very easy to slip, but the important thing, or the very, very helpful thing, is if you bring it into the source and you make a note of where you actually want it to be, whatever your point of, you know, contact is with the picture below, and so you have the time code so you can read it when you go into, it doesn't want to go in here, hold on a second. Oh, because I have to be moving it, sorry. So yeah, so you can read the time code and find out where you want to be. So that's slip. Okay, so now we're going to do slide. And what that does is you've got 3 clips in a row, and you want to retain your outer edges of the 3. But that one in the middle isn't in the right place. It's not on the beat of the music. It's not where the person is saying what they should be saying. So you want to move that middle one and have the outer edges stay the same. So you're shortening or lengthening those two while moving the one in the middle along the way. Okay, so here we have the example, which is 3 shots. We want to retain this border and that border, but this is in the wrong place because, I'm just going to play this for a second. She goes to drink her wine
Okay, I'm going to add a little
And then we
olive oil
see
to my water.
her doing that.
While the water is boiling, I'm going to cut up.
And I thought maybe we'd just see a little more of her drinking. This isn't a perfect example, just bear with me. So what I want to do is use the slide and move this over slightly and let go. So the edges are the same. That has changed position.
Okay, I'm going to add a little olive oil to my water. While the water is boiling, I'm going to cut up.
You know, that's not a perfect edit by any stretch of the imagination, but at least you see what happens. And look, you know, you could do that. You can do whatever, and always these outer ones are the same. So if you need to shift things. Now, the only thing that does matter is if things aren't on the same track, this is what happens. And that one moved, but look, you've got a gap. So when you do this, you have to make sure that all of your picture and all of your audio tracks are on the same track, okay? And I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to call it D for not really done. So there are 3 more tools in the toolbar. These I'm going to go through really quickly because I'll show you something about them later. The next one is the pen tool, which is the letter P for pen, and that's how you make keyframes when you're doing things later. The next one is the hand tool, which does this. And the next one is the text tool, which you can use for writing, but I wouldn't use it. I would use the legacy title, and I'll show you why later, because it's much more flexible. So that's the way I work. So now I'm going to go through a lot of other things that you can do in your edit. We'll start with, I'm just going to review speed and duration. So if you're on a clip and you want to change the speed of it or the duration of it, you go up, right-click, speed, duration. You can either choose the speed of it or the duration. So I can say like 50%. There's reverse speed, maintain audio pitch, and ripple, edit, shifting, trailing clips. I had a student who had a lot of trouble doing reverse speed. So if you want to do it, try it, but I'm not sure it works. But let's say I want it to be 50%, and I say OK. Now it's at 50%, and it's gotten a lot longer because it's slowed down and stretched out. So I'm just going to undo that. So the next thing is about doing various effects within a clip, either picture or audio, but I'm going to deal with the audio more in Chapter 4 about audio. So here's an example. We're going to expand this a little bit so you can see. So you have this little icon that says Effects, and you have Motion, Opacity, or Time Remapping. Motion, I'm going to actually work with in a different way. So I'm going to show you opacity. So I'm going to select it. And now there's a line, not just in this clip, but in all of the clips. If you wanted to change opacity, you wanted to do a fade in, fade out, or just a weird fade in, fade out because you're playing some crazy music. You're going to use the pen tool, P, and you're going to make one there, and 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 make one there. Then you're going to drag this one down, and this one even further down, and this one not so far down, and maybe that one all the way so it fades out. And then...
Okay. While the water is boiling, I'm going to cut up my bacon, which is guanciale. You can also use Oscar Mayer bacon or pancetta.
Which is obviously not what you would ever want to do with that shot. But if you ever do want to do something like this, then that's how you do it. You can obviously add as many as you want. You can also do an auto fade in and fade out, which I think I showed you before. But now you've got this, I'm going to put this back on V. You've got this line everywhere. And so let's say I wanted to move this clip. Let me make this a little smaller. I want to move this clip somewhere else. And it's, you know, you can never make something happen when you want it to happen, right? But there have been any number of times that I've grabbed something to go somewhere else with it, and I've inadvertently grabbed this line and moved it. And I really don't want that to happen, particularly with audio, because if you've done a lot of audio editing and you grab this and you think you're going to go somewhere else and instead you just cut your audio out completely, or you thought you were going to move this and whoops, you did that instead, you don't want to do that. So how do you avoid that? You go to the wrench tool that's in your timeline and you click on it and it says show thumbnails, keyframes, names, etc., etc., etc. So it right now is showing video keyframes, and I'm going to say don't, please don't. I'm also going to go and say show audio keyframes because I don't want them there. But meanwhile, what's really handy when you're editing is to see the waveform. So it opened, like it sort of defaulted to show the waveform, but if I did that, I wouldn't see anything. And when I was listening, I kind of wouldn't know where anything was. So I would say you always keep on the audio waveform. If you like thumbnails, you can have them. If you don't, you can say don't show them. I'll put them back on. So just a reminder that when you're using keyframes and the effects, you need them when you're doing them, and then you need them to be gone when you're done. Because you're not going to be constantly changing the opacity of a clip or whatever else it might be. So it's safer just to have them off until you need them, and that's easy enough. The other thing I mentioned was motion. Of these three, you have motion, opacity, and time remapping. But this is how it's much easier to work with motion. Okay, so I've got this clip, and I'm thinking maybe I should zoom in a little bit. So I put my play bar over the clip so I can see it, but then I also double click so that it's in the source window, right? So now my bad, see, look, I'm in the learning thing. I didn't realize I wasn't in editing because we were using a different computer. Here we go. And in fact, because I switched computers, now you see that there's also the metadata one in here. I have no idea what any of this stuff is. So for me, I'm going to close the panel. And the audio clip mixer was not in before, but anyway, that's what it is. And you've got effect controls, and that's where we want to be. So we were in the source, and we went over to effect controls, right? Now, you have motion, opacity, which again, you could do in here. But I find opacity is easier for me over here because I can see where my pen tool P points are. Whereas here, you're doing it kind of here, so we actually see that I've done them. But I find it easier to do it in the clip than over here. So I don't really use this much for opacity. So I'm just going to close that. So motion. So here we have position, X and Y, and scale. So scale, you can expand, and you can scale it up or scale it down, however you want. Or we'll put it back to 100, sort of. And then this is the same thing you've seen before where you can roll that number up there, or you can go in here and type 120 for 120%. So let's say we actually want to really zoom in but now her head is getting cut off, right? And we don't want that. So we're going to change the position. And this is side to side. This is top to bottom. So I'm just going to pull it down slightly. And then, you know, do I want it to be centered, or do I want it to be maybe a little bit over in this area because the background is more interesting? So that's how you do it. And remember, you can only see what you're doing if your play bar is over the clip in your timeline, so you can see it in the program window. And then we go back here and it's fine, but in here it's been changed, right? Sorry, I forgot to film showing you how to do paste attributes. So if you've done something either in the picture or the audio that you want to repeat in another clip, you simply do copy, Command C, on the clip you've changed, and then you go to the one you want to copy it to, and you right-click on it, and you see Paste Attributes, and then what will open next is this window, and it will give you options. So if you've changed opacity, in this case, or if you've changed something about an audio track, you just select the parts that you want to copy over into the other clip, and it will be done. So since you've just learned about using the motion, I'm going to show you how to do a split screen very, very easily, which uses the same with two clips, right? So here we are, and we've got this shot of her talking about the guanciale, and I might want to show her cutting the guanciale while she talks about it. So I'm going to take this shot of her cutting it, and I'm just going to drag the visual over. So I'm going to use the Option key so that I can just drag that over, and it might not start at the very beginning. So let's say it's going to start about there.
Is boiling. I'm going to cut up my bacon, which is guanciale. You can also.
Well, I don't know if she's going to fit totally in the frame doing it this way. So let's just see what happens. Okay. So the upper track, I want to be on the right side of the screen. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to go to Effect Controls. I'm going to go to Motion, and I'm going to move it over about halfway. And the other one seems to have been moved, so I have to go to that one and see what the deal is with the black at the top. I think it got moved down when I did that other thing. So here it is, and maybe I can cheat her over slightly this way, and then maybe I would move the other one, go to Effect Controls, I would move that one a little this way, and I would also need to move that one, well, it's kind of a close-up shot. Okay, let's see if this makes any sense.
Okay. While the water is boiling, I'm going to cut up my bacon, which is.
But that kind of doesn't work because I need to be to the right on that second shot. So as you see, that didn't really work because she was centered, and when I tried to get her over to the right place for it, there was too much of her on the right, and the other image couldn't overlap correctly, right? If you're taking in one image and you're just using the right edge of it, and the other image and you're just using the left edge, you can make them meet in the middle and everything is fine. But if you have anything like this situation, what you have to do is use the crop tool, which is in your effects window. So we will do that now so you can see how it works. So the first thing is that I had changed things around when I was just doing that stuff. And so these numbers were completely different. And I wanted to just revert the images to how they had been, and you just use the reset tool and you get back to the basics. The crop tool is already in this image, so I'll just show you in the other one, because this is her. So let's say we want to do this with both of them. So here's our other image, and down in the project window is the Effects tab, and I said before it has many, many, many features, which I'm not going to go into, but in this case, this is a very important one. And so within Video Effects, it's there, but there are lots of video effects, but at the moment, I just asked for that, so I'm going to get rid of that and show you that there are lots and lots and lots of them. So if you don't want to guess where something is, you write in the word crop, and there it is. And then you just drag it into the clip, and when you open Effect Controls, now you have crop. And since she's pretty much centered, then what I'm calculating is a pretty smart move, is to do the left side. Well, let me make sure. You always got to make sure. See, I didn't have that image called up. I was seeing it in the program window, but that's not what was in the source window. And it's easy for stuff like that to happen. So before you do something, make sure that what you're seeing over here is what's over here. Okay, so here she is, and here's the crop tool, left and right. So I'm going to do each at 25%. You can again roll to get it, or you can just write in something. And now, as you see, she's 25%. So I'm going to move her over to that end. Okay. The other one is not as easy to position, but if I call this one, now that that one is in place and it's blocking that side, I should be able to move this one over there. And I want to use it full frame top and bottom because it's already pretty close up, and I'm not saying this is like the perfect split screen, but that's the idea. So, you know, you crop one and it becomes the mat, so to speak, behind which you can slide the other. So now we have.
Oh, okay. While the water is boiling, I'm going to cut up my bacon, which is guanciale. You can also use Oscar Mayer bacon or pancetta.
Okay, there's your split screen. And now I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to call it E. So the next thing we're going to do is called subclipping. And basically you interviewed somebody for 3 hours, or you filmed an entire night at the circus, whatever it is, and you've got a really, 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 really long clip, and you don't want to keep dealing with it, right? Maybe you even have a 4-minute clip, and it's just too long to have in your sequence and, you know, keep moving around, cutting up, whatever. So what you can do that's really great is you can create subclips. And the way you think about it is that you've got your clip, you'll show you, you put it in there, you pick a section. Okay, this is the first part of the interview. It creates this subclip. You call it first part of the interview, so you know what you're looking at. Your original is intact. Okay. The other thing is that when you have your subclip, it's not like the regular media. So you've got your subclip and you think, oh, I forgot the first sentence of the start of the interview. And you try to drag it over, you're not going to be able to, because all you have is that. You can go back to your original and make a new subclip, obviously. But so you want to think when you're making your subclip to be a little bit generous about the edges. Give a little bit at the beginning, a little bit at the end. If you think it's not that critical, give it a few frames, or give it another second, or whatever. So that's the idea. The other idea is that if you make a lot of subclips, they're going to be all over the place unless you make a folder for them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our project window and we're going to make a new bin. And we're going to call it subclips. And obviously, if these are subclips for interview number 1, I'm going to say subs for number 1, because later I'm going to make subs for number 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I kind of want to know where everything is. Okay, so now I've selected this subclip folder. And I want to go back up with that to find the clip that I want to cut down. And in my case, I don't have 20-minute clips. I've just got, you see media duration over here, and I saw that the longest clip was breaking the eggs. So I'm going to put that up here. And at the moment, it has an endpoint set way down at the end, but I'm just going to drag this all back so I can sort of look at it and see.
Go. While the posture's
So after she starts talking, and I think, okay, we'll start there. But since I want a little bit of extra, I might want, here. So let's say that's my in. And then I'm going to play.
While the pasta's boiling, I'm going to start separating my eggs.
And I think I might cut away to something else. So let's say that's the end of that, but I'm going to give it a little bit more. Okay, there's my out. And then I'm going to go up to clip, make subclip, and I'm going to call it start eggs. Or I might call it 1 eggs, because I know this shot is going to be broken up sequentially, and this is the first one. So you name things whatever makes sense to you. And there we go. And now we're going to look. Here it is. Why did it not go into? I think I might have unselected the subclip folder when I called up the clip. So that was my bad. I'm going to just grab that out of here. And put it in here. Okay, so now that my image is up here and I'm good, I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to go along here and I'm going to decide that, this is the head of this is the tail of this, clip, make subclip, and look what it is. It's Command U. So this time, I'm going to be done with that, and I'm going to do Command U, and I'm going to call it 2 eggs. And I'm going to say OK, and there it is. And on we go. Here's my next one. Out, Command U, 3 eggs. Done. So now you have them all in one place, and when you bring them in, I'll make that larger using the plus arrow key. So I can make it smaller, but that's as big as I can make it. So again, you want to have enough there to work with. So that's how you subclip. There might be times when you want to duplicate a clip in the timeline. You can duplicate it. Obviously, you can go into your project and pick a clip and right-click on it and say duplicate, but it might be while you're working for some reason. Maybe you're going to do a split screen and you want the full image, and then you want it split with an extreme close-up of something from the other image. So all you do is you click on it and you use the Option key and you drag it up, and you have a second. And you see, I got a second of the visual, but I didn't get a second of the audio. Then if you do Option on your audio, you've got a second audio clip. And as you see, we're seeing the keyframes. So I want to go back to the wrench tool and say, don't show them. Unless I wanted to work with those two now that I wanted to make it normal sound level, right? Okay, so that's how you duplicate a clip. I'm going to do 2 very simple things. One is about navigating and one is about black video. So if you remember, when we set the preferences, we decided whether we wanted the mouse wheel to do a vertical roll or a horizontal roll. So as you can see, in my case, I do horizontal so I can do this, because I feel like I don't really need to go up and down that often. And if you need to change scale, you can do this or move up and down. So That's all there is to it, but you might choose vertical. That's your choice. The other thing is that when you're editing, obviously whenever you create a gap, it might be deliberate, right? So let's say for some reason I wanted this to stop, and then maybe I'm going to put in a title card later or something, and then I'm going to return to this. But I'm not ready to make my title cards, and I might later in a hurry think, oh, I've got that gap in there, let me close it. So if I don't want to make that mistake, I'm just going to go over to the project window, to New Item, and I'm going to go up to Black Video. And the first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to make sure that none of my folders are selected. I'm going to go to New Item, and I'm going to go to Black Video, and just say OK, because it's fine. And now I've got Black Video. And I can drag that in. You know, it's a certain length. Let me expand that. It's a certain length, and you can always make it longer or shorter. I can rename this, and I can say title later, for example, which I would do beforehand, and I would bring that in so that I had a reference for what that was going to be later. That's all there is to it. It's just Black Video, which is also called slug. So now it may be that you want to work with fade outs, fade ins, cross fades. Not very hard to do. So I will show you a couple of things about when you do that. So here we are, and we've got this shot, and we want a little bit of a transition, right? We want to crossfade. So you've got your clips on the same track. They have to be on the same track. You just rest your cursor on the cut point, and you say Apply Default Transitions. So look what happened. You got your crossfade here, but you've also got it in your audio. And I would say you do not want that in your audio, because when I talk about audio, I'm going to talk about the fact that that's a really important aspect of the film, and it's really worth learning how to do sound editing, essentially, manually, because you've got two audio tracks, they're overlapped, because you want to fade out from one and you want to bring in the other. And they're very different. You know, there's all kinds of stuff going on each one. And if you just do an auto cross, it's not going to be good, because you're going to want to expand one further because you want to do a slower fade in or whatever. So forget that. Just delete that right now. And now you've got this visual cross, and it's okay, right? But maybe you think, it should be slower. So you right click on it, and it says Set Transition Duration, and you say, I don't want it to be 106, I want it to be 4. Okay, and then we see what 4 seconds looks like.
The guanciale is starting to...
Do we like that? Maybe we like that. Okay. If, I'm going to delete that, I'm going to pull this over so I can show you something which might be a problem. I'm just going to I've got 2 of these because I duplicated that, so I'm just going to get rid of that one. And then I'm going to ripple delete, right click, close, and let's see what happens. Now I'm trying to do a default transition, and look what happened. The first clip could only cross into the second one because there was no media in the second one. The media ends here, and when you're doing a cross, this stuff needs to fade in and this needs to fade out. If you don't have anything here to fade in, it can't do it, right? So if you ever run into this problem, that's why. So I'm going to get rid of that cross, and I'm going to drag this back a little so we have media to work with. And this clip is unlinked, so I'm going to relink it. And even though I showed you how you should get rid of that auto cross on the audio, the other way is to simply unlink both of those, so they're not linked anymore. Do your default, and it's not on the audio. But the thing is, then you have to remember to relink the clips. So I find it easier to let that stupid audio thing come in and then just delete it. So let's say you want to put a crossfade here, and I'm going to get rid of that. And you want it to be longer. So we're going to make it like, 3. But you also want it to start not directly in the center. So then you just click and drag it. So basically it's like a slip and slide, but for doing a transition, which is pretty nifty. So I think it doesn't want to go further now because there isn't enough media behind it. But anyway, that's how you can shift where your cross starts. And of course, you might just want to fade out on this shot. So all you need to do is drag this down to another track. And then if you choose there, now you just have a fade out. So since I talk a lot about keyboard shortcuts, I just showed you if you right click on it how you get this option. But if your play bar is right on the cut, so you use your arrow key to move over, and then you use Command D, it creates it. And this is good because it doesn't put it in the audio. So this is sort of a neater way of doing it. Then you can either double click on it and change the duration. So let's say I'll make it 220. Or I can click and drag it and change the duration. And then again, I can change the position of the cross dissolve. So I would say that using the Command D shortcut is kind of quicker and cleaner than doing the other thing. Now, even though I said you should always do manual transitions for sound editing, and I can't stress that enough, if you needed to do a quick cross, you would do something similar that you just did up there, which is Command Shift D, and now you have that. So what we did was we created one, but since they're not on the same track, what I've done by stretching it out also is I've created a slow fade out and a slow fade in. So it's not a true cross. So if I undo those, and then I drag this one down, and I'm still on the cut point, and I do Command Shift D, then it's a cross fade between them. And remember, if you do a cross with your visual, let's say, and there's something weird about it, you can always have one of them with a cross, like fading in or fading out, and with the other one, you can use opacity to change it. So you can combine the two ways of doing it. I mentioned before that that's not a function I usually use, but it can be really handy. And let's say you've done a piece that has some sort of title card or ads or whatever it is that's a certain length, and now you have to put in a new one. It's very easy just to use it to replace it. Maybe you have to do that a number of times, or whatever, in whatever way you find that it's a useful thing to do. So we'll have this example where we have the edit, and I was thinking it would probably be good to put a clip in here. Now, obviously, I could drag everything over, bring it in, drag it back, and it'd be fine. But it might be an edited sequence that I want to bring in there. So it might be a little bit complicated, and it might be neater to do an insert. So the first thing I do is I just use my arrow keys to go over to the cut point where I want to insert it, but I also have an out point which I don't want, because otherwise it'll say there isn't enough room or whatever. It'll tell me not, there'll be a problem. So I want to right click and clear my out point so that I'm ready to do it. And then I've decided I want to put this shot in, and I can either go down here and click on it, or as it tells you right there in the name, I can use the comma, okay? So watch what happens. That shot came in perfectly cleanly between that one and that one. So I'm good, okay? So I'm going to undo that because now I'm going to show you overwrite. And this, as I think I mentioned, is a little more problematic because you are overwriting what's there already. So this shot is however long, it's 34 seconds. And if I do overwrite, which is a period, it says right there, watch what happens. It went over the stuff that was there already. So that shot is that long, but now I've lost the stuff that's below it. There could be a reason why you want to do that. There's a good reason for everything. But if you don't want to do that, then don't do it. So that's the basics of insert and overwrite. I'm going to show you the other title program, which we find by going to the graphics menu. And when you go in there, there's browse and edit. So the first thing you're going to do is browse for what you want. And we're going to just do a basic title, okay? So I'm going to left click and drag it over because I'm going to identify this person, right? So if I'm in the window, I'm going to say Kathy Quinlan. And then if I want it to be at the top, in the middle, at the bottom, flush left, centered, flush right. I can do any of those, okay? So let's put it in the middle again. Then I can also change the position, same way with the others, up and down. I can change the size of it. I actually don't know what this is. Well, it seems to be another position thing. Okay, there you go. I can change the font to anything I want, Palatino. I can, you know, it's kind of like Photoshop and all these other programs. I can make it bold, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can make it deep blue. And if I'm happy with that, which would be hard to believe, then I'm good. And then if I want to do the second one, I can Command-C copy, and I can Command-V paste and bring it above. And now I might want to say that this is, you know, cuts bacon. And it's exactly the same, but it's maybe too long or too short, so I can change the length of it, etc. The only thing I don't know about this, because I don't use it, is that what I've tried to do, here's my title cards, I tried to drag it over to have it in there, but I can't. So I don't know why that is. So all I can see is that you just create one. If you're formatting a bunch of them, you create the first one, you copy, move this, do it again. So that's what I can tell you about the graphics program. So let's say we want this to be the picture we use on the poster for the film, right? I'm going to first make a folder in my project folder. So I'm going to drill down until I get to my project folder. And remember that we made a folder called Carbo Found Footage and Images. And I think of that as found footage. You know, I went to Google and I got pictures of carbonara, whatever it is, as opposed to images from the film. So I'm going to make a new folder called Carbo Still Images whoops, images from the film, let's say, or whatever. Just something that makes me know what it is. Okay, so I'll just minimize that and whoops, close that. So here we are, and I think I want to use this as my still image. So I'm going to go down to the camera, the export frame. I'm going to click on export, and I'm going to call it pasta and finger, because maybe I'm going to get another one that's a little bit different. So I just want to know, each time what I'm doing. And that says DPX. I could use TIFF because that's higher resolution than a JPEG. And it says import into project, but I want to say where. So I drill down, I get to this, and I choose that. And then I say OK. And then if I want to see them, just to look at them, there they are. But what I really want to do now is I want to import them into the project. Now, if I'm just using this to make the poster, I don't need to import it into the project. But it could be that I, was going along doing something and then I wanted to freeze on it. So I'm going to bring this in by going back to my media browser and going to, and I'm going to drill down, which takes a while, so we're going to cut. Okay, hold on. So I've gotten down to the still images, and there I am. And I haven't chosen a location for it in the folder, so for now I'm just going to say right-click and import. And they've imported it. So the still image that I made is here, pasta and finger, TIFF. It doesn't have a folder yet. I think I would make a new folder for Carbo still images, and I would put it in there so that other things that I do later are in there. And then if I wanted to add it in, I would just drag it in, and there it is, the still image. So
Ingredients: pasta, bacon.
okay, so that's one way of doing it, but that's also so that you have good images for later. So I just showed you how to do that so that you would have them in your project folder, your bigger folder, so you've got images that you really like. But if you know that aren't things that you necessarily use later, and you just need them in the film, you can do a kind of quick and dirty thing, which is pretty much the same, where, here's your image again, you go to export, and this time we say yes, and import into project, and we name it something like eggs, whatever, and I say okay, and there it is, but it's not in a bin. So if I drag that over to the bin icon, I've got a new bin and I call it, stills, and it's in there. But the thing is, even when you do a second one, which I'll do again, and I'll call it second, and do OK. See, it's sitting out in the overall, but then I can just drag it into that folder. So there you have all of them. So we're pretty much at the end. We are, in fact, at the end of chapter 3, except for I didn't save as F. And there's a chapter 4 that's about audio editing. And just to remind you, there's a whole document of all the keyboard shortcuts. And the other thing that I'm going to do for a little while is I'm going to make chapter 5, which I would call narrating while I'm editing. So I'm just going to start to set up the film as I would when I was working on my own without talking out loud to myself about what I was doing. So you can get a little feel for how I might build something. And then after all of these, the last video will be the film where you actually learn how to make spaghetti carbonara with Kathy Quinlan, and who's a really great cook. and also a really wonderful painter, and who agreed to produce this little tutorial about how to make carbonara. So I recommend you watch it and then try making it at home because it's really delicious. So we'll now move on to audio editing in Chapter 4 and outputting the file, which is pretty straightforward. We'll do that really quickly. Thank you for watching this. I hope it's useful. Share it with anybody you want. I want to thank Princeton University for supporting me doing this because I did it in this beautiful studio, and Dan Kearns is the engineer for the University Broadcast Center, so he set it all up and he did a fantastic job, and I want to thank him. So have a good time editing.